How will Tipperary do this season? Well, we're brought to you here by orgaretro.com. I'm wearing the Tipperary Zippy. Get 15% off this. Go to orgaretro.com, use the promo code OurGame, and you can get this. Michael Vernon, you're wearing a Derry jersey there, are you?
Beautiful little Derry jersey, yeah,
Yeah,
peach.
yeah, it's looking well. If only it was on a nicer hanger, that's the only thing I'd say. Right, Tipperary this year. There's been an absence of, you'd have to say there's been absence of hype so far and talk about Tipperary.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, less hype has to be a help to them. Just the way things have worked out. Like, what were we talking about at the start of the year? We were talking about the pressure to do back to back, all the one in a rows that Tip have done since 1965, haven't been able to back it up with successive titles. There's no talk about that this year, really, because everybody's just happy that there's a championship taking place and just eager to see games happening. So there's probably less hype in the media. Haven't really seen it put out there much about the back to back and their chase to do it. Interesting as well. Like, Liam Sheedy is technically going for a three in a row. Like, the last 3 years he was over Tipperary, 10, 19, and now this year he's won the All Irelands the last two times. So he's technically going for a three in a row. It's sickening that by December 13th, Liam McCarthy will have been in Tipperary for 15 months rather than the usual 12. And whoever wins it in 2021 will probably only have it about 8 months, probably, realistically, as well. I hadn't actually thought about that before, but yeah, no, definitely less of a hype, and it has to be a help to them, because we've kind of maybe seen how the wheels have come off somewhat when Tipperary were trying to retain Liam McCarthy in recent years. So I think that has to be a help.
Isn't it interesting that Tipperary haven't won Munster since 2016? Liam Sheedy hasn't won Munster since 2009, and last year obviously was a fairly devastating Munster final loss. And I think here's where Tipperary's season turned. I mean, even after that, they're fairly poor against Laois, albeit winning with the O'Moore County always at arm's length. But it was only that Wexford game, especially down to 14 men, that we saw Tipperary bare their teeth, and from then on, absolutely roasted Kilkenny in the final as well, albeit Kilkenny would question the red card to Richie Hogan for whatever reason, I don't know, but they still are questioning it. I've plenty of people taking chops at me every time I mention any other red card online. So there you go. But like Tipperary, I think have they changed much from this time last year? Well, obviously not this time last year, but from the Munster final last year, because we're talking about the provincial preview, and I would say that they've changed massively. I mean, I would have always kind of questioned, was there enough 6'2" athletes in the team, especially the back line, guys who could hurl as well, and Seamus Kennedy and Barry Heffernan were brought into the team without singling out the guys who were taken out of it. Obviously there was injuries to the likes of Cathal Barrett, then Bonner Maher, who's back injured since. It's quite a different Tipperary prospect to what we saw in that Munster final.
100%. It's funny, like, everybody looks at the end of the year and look Tipperary, look how right Sheedy got it or whatever, and you'd have to go back and say 2010. Why did Tipperary win the All Ireland in 2010? Because Cork basically ripped them apart that day down in, I think it was down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and it showed them maybe the changes that they needed to make. Now, they stumbled almost upon their winning combination in 2010. Remember, Shane McGrath was centre forward for a game. They stumbled on across the winning combination, but it fell perfectly for them. Last year was the same. They probably thought they had a certain team at the start of the year, and even coming into the Munster final, the script was ripped up a bit then. Ronan Matter went back fullback, maybe Barry Heffernan came in, even cornerback at some stages, and Seamus Kennedy came in too. So they've kind of stumbled across that kind of winning combination as well. Interesting as well from Sheedy's point of view, like he's never actually got to defend an All-Ireland as manager yet too, and this will be his first chance to do so. They've kind of kept quiet too. They've not allowed the hype train to run wild. I think I got an interview with Niall O'Mara there. It's in our championship preview for the Independent, and I think the only reason I got it was because I had organised it about 8 or 9 months ago. But they've kept very, very quiet. They've kept very, very low key. They don't. I think Liam was probably aware of, maybe lads kind of running away with themselves a small bit. Maybe like things have happened before and the wheels have come off. But what's going to be different this year? It would be interesting to see. Tipperary tend to play through the lines a lot, play to space an awful lot, play a lot of kind of slick stuff that is perfectly suited to summer hurling. And I'm wondering whether they'll be able to do that in the conditions. Are they as finely tuned maybe as a Limerick to do that in the wintry conditions, I'm not so sure. Maybe they'll stack their full forward line even more and play a lot more direct. While you're used to seeing Callan come out in front, he's well able to win high ball as well. If it's delivered in properly, if it's a good diagonal ball where it's a one-on-one with the fullback, he's well able to win that too. You could see John McGrath in around the edge of the square too. So it'd be interesting to see. It is a different type of season for them, and I think the lack of a pre-season probably suits Shamie Callan, Bonner Matter, Brendan Matter, particularly after a long club campaign going in. He's had a break now. Bonner Matter, we don't know how fit he is, like, to actually play games. I'm presuming, knowing how well he keeps himself, that he'll be ready to go. Winter hurling will suit him perfectly too. I just think it suits their age profile not to have gone through a rigorous pre-season of about 3 or 4 months. They've all done plenty with their clubs. They've come in here now, and I think there's a lot of cards kind of stacked in their favour with this winter championship.
I wonder how much it will alter Liam Sheedy's thinking in terms of his selection policies. The fact that it's probably by and large going to be dirtier weather. Like, at the moment, it's not as if the weather has changed that much and the ground has changed massively. Like, I suppose we would have felt it during the summer playing club championships that it did change a little bit, but it's not all of a sudden soggy, dirty, rotten weather. That might change really, really quickly. But as we speak, you probably wouldn't change the Tipperary team too much from 2019, from the All-Ireland final. Maybe certain tweaks here and there. Maybe Jake Morris has done a little bit to sort of push himself up the pecking order after that hat-trick against Thurles Sarsfields in the Tipperary Championship. But would Liam Sheedy be thinking, right, Bubbles has been, very, very impressive at Croke Park in the summer in All-Ireland finals. Like, if you go with his record at Croke Park in those big games, especially the All-Ireland finals against Kilkenny in recent times, he's putting up big scores. But would you be looking at Bubbles in, like, you're talking about all this long ball? I would be concerned if Tipperary went too much long ball. I think that was a huge problem in 17 and 18. But, like, Bubbles wouldn't necessarily be massively suited to it, especially if it was like a crowded penalty area. He sort of does his best work when there's a little bit more space. I'm not saying he can't catch a ball, because he definitely can, but I'd be worried about him and Tipperary overall if they did too much of that. So let's say he was put out, John McGrath's been used centre forward, but let's say Bubbles was put out wing or centre forward, and you're thinking he can pick scores from distance, and that would be a huge asset for Tipperary. But if it turns it into a lot of dirty, rotten old games where you have to win 50-50 ball, ruck ball, you're going to get thrown around the place, will Dan McCormack be used ahead of him? Will Bonner Maher be used ahead of him? Like Michael Breen at times, like, he's had some good performances, had some not so good performances, but will he be suited because of his physicality? So I think that's some of the things that will be factored in with Liam Sheedy. If it was a summer All-Ireland, I think Ger Brown might get thrown in an awful lot more because he has serious speed, but he's probably a little bit light. I'm not really sure that a winter All-Ireland is the place to throw him in. So there is all that going in for Sheedy, like, in terms of who he picks.
Yeah, the under 20 and under 21 All-Ireland winning teams in recent years, right? There's two ways of looking at it. They've had another, 6 or 7 months. They've gone through a full club campaign, and now they're coming back in with Tip, having been with them earlier on in the year. But you look at it and you see usually a lighter kind of a profile of a player that wants top of the ground a bit more. So I wonder, will they be as effective in the winter? We mentioned in previous videos about the lack of a pre-season would leave question marks about whether players will be able to get through 75 or 80 minutes. Then it comes down to your squad. Do Tipperary have a squad? Yes, they definitely do have a squad. Like Willie Connors was coming in for 10 or 15 minutes in games last year, making a big difference. Mark Keogh the same, Ger Brown, Jerome Cahill. They definitely have the panel. That will definitely suit them as well. Another interesting thing as well is, and I think this, I know it's a long time ago, but I do think it'll help. The fact even that they got away on a training camp just as COVID was hitting as well. That's something that no team was able to do. I know it was 6 or 7 months ago or whatever, but I'm sure they got through a massive lot of work, a massive lot of tactical work that maybe other teams haven't been able to do. Like, teams aren't able to go, and sit in a hotel for 2 days and go through tactics or anything like that. So while they haven't probably got to implement what they talked through on that holiday, I think that will definitely benefit them as well. They have the squad. All those players coming through over the last couple of years, like Billy Seymour as well, is another player that might see a bit of game time. Paul Flynn was brilliant for Killadangan. Both of those obviously Killadangan as well. Alan Flynn was flying for Killadangan too. When you're looking at squads, and you look at maybe Mike Casey been out for Limerick and maybe Richie English possibly been out as well, you probably would think maybe the balance has been tipped in Tip's favour, that they probably have the best squad out there.
Yeah, and there's a decent size profile throughout the team. You know, people often think silky hurlers, whatever, with Tipperary, but Brian Hogan's a massive goalkeeper. Ronan Maher, assuming he starts full back, is a big man. Barry Heffernan is huge. Seamus Kennedy's 6'1" or 2. Brendan Maher's not a small man. Paddy Maher's huge. I mean, even Michael Breen is a very big man. Bonner, John McGrath is big, like Seamus Callan is huge. Very big size profile, and I think that could count double in the winter.
Massive. And when you look at as well, I mentioned about Mike Casey and Richie English. So Limerick are starting minus two of their key defenders. Tip at this very moment in time are not starting without anybody. They have a full deck to pick from, which is massive, because Limerick are gonna lose a couple of lads as they go along. Tip will probably lose a couple of lads as they go along, and if you pick up a soft tissue injury, chances are you're probably going to miss the whole championship. So the fact that they're starting with a clean bill of health is very, very important also as well, because you will lose guys, but to be not starting without one or two is a big bonus too. So I would say they probably have the best panel at the moment, and the lack of hype has to be a help to them as well. I think there's a lot pointing towards an impressive defence. Now I don't know whether they'll go and win back to back, but you can't.
You don't want to see it anyway.
No, I probably don't want to see it, but honest with you. But there's other defences of their All-Ireland, like when they were beaten in 17, defending the All-Ireland from 16, they kind of limped through that championship. They were hammered in the league final. They delivered probably one of their best performances of the year in the semi-final against Galway, only for Canning to put over that point at the end and score the last 5 for Galway. But it wasn't an impressive defence. I don't know. I don't think Tip will win the All-Ireland. I think they'll be very, very close. But I think it'll be an impressive defence of their All-Ireland.
Yeah, I think Tipperary have to be up there, probably right up there at the very top. Just in terms of players changeover in the last while, James Barry's retired, Donna Maher's retired, John Maher, who was really good for Lockmore, he's jumped over from the football panel to the hurling side of things, and he's another very physical player who's not in any way small. So I think he could jump right into contention for game time as well. If we look at the league, 2 wins and 3 losses from 5 league games, losing to Limerick, Cork, and Galway. Beat Westmeath and Waterford. So it's, Waterford I think are going to improve massively this year. Westmeath, Tipperary would always expect to win. It's not like the form lines have been great, but then again, I don't think necessarily Tip are too worried if the form lines from the league are great. And obviously that is so many months ago at this stage.
They weren't great last year as well though, Shane.
Yeah,
too.
so it's almost irrelevant.
And then the flick switch for Munster, and it was just a different team completely.
Yeah, I mean, the McGraths, are they going to be anyway jaded or tired after getting to both county finals with Lockmore? Because that would tire you out playing probably 10 or 11 matches at the same time. Maybe they're right up to the pitch of it more so than anybody. They will play the winners of Limerick and Clare in the Munster semi-final, and is it an advantage that the winners of the other game, that they get a match under their belt? Is that an advantage to them, or does Tipperary being able to stand there, sort of plot and plan, analyse the opposition? Because it's not as if the winner of that game is going to go out with plan B. They're going to have all their cards on the table, and Tipperary and Liam Sheedy and the backroom team, they're going to be able to plan everything. There's a serious backroom team there. Eamon O'Shea is involved, Tommy Dunn's involved, Dara Egan is involved. So Owen Kelly. So Liam Sheedy is leaving nothing to chance there. I think Tipperary have to be right up there. 94 to win Munster, 10-3 to win the All-Ireland. There'll be a puck of a ball in it, no matter who wins the All-Ireland. If it's against Tip, I think basically you'll have to go through Tipperary if you want to win the All-Ireland this year. And I'm not saying that in a sort of I'm from Tipperary and therefore I'm pro Tipperary. It's just like, we've gone through it. Where are Tipperary lacking? Do they have the size? They do. Do they have the hurling? They do. Is there maybe too many miles on the clock? Maybe there's a question mark there. Do they have the line? Yeah, they have the line. Do they have a panel? I think they've the same, if not better depth than anyone else. So that's why I'd have to have them right up there, because I just don't necessarily see where they're weaker than other teams.
Yeah, the miles on the clock, I think in a normal season may be a factor. I don't think as much now. Like, those guys are absolutely seasoned, and those lads I mentioned earlier about having a shorter pre-season, like, those lads will all keep themselves in top nick. They'll be ready to come into this absolutely flying. Interesting. They've played Antrim and Offaly in challenge games in recent weeks, which I was a bit surprised about, to be honest. I know Darren Gleeson, there's a connection there, obviously. I think Antrim gave them a half decent game. It was definitely a good game for Antrim to get. And Tip gave Offaly an awful shellacking there at the weekend. They normally play them in a challenge game every year. I was a bit surprised. I obviously don't like to see Offaly getting beaten by anybody, but a bit surprised that you have Galway playing Limerick in a challenge game and Tip are playing Offaly, which is Offaly who are in the third tier of hurling at the moment. So
is it a keeping your cards close to your chest and keeping, obviously trying to keep the hype down again? People might talk about the fact that Limerick played Galway and read somewhat into it, whereas if people hear that Tipperary played Offaly and Antrim, and no disrespect because they're playing at different levels, there's probably not going to be too much comment passed either way.
Maybe so. Just on two players you mentioned coming in there, like John Matter, I think is tailor made for this kind of winter season as well. Big, strong, physical kind of half back. I think he could be an asset coming in for the last 10 or 15 minutes of a game, maybe when other guys are tiring as well, because he's very, very hard to get around, particularly if it's going to be a bit more of a long ball game. And just something on earlier, I do think Tip will go a bit more direct. Now, I don't think that'll be their number one tactic, but I definitely think they will mix it between going through the lines and going long, because the only thing about, when we get, the pitches aren't too bad at the moment, but when we get maybe 5 or 6 weeks down the line, there's an awful lot of work to get it from, the full back line to the half forward line by playing through the hand. There's an awful lot more chances for mistakes or a spill or something like that. So I do think, they'll be trying to get the ball to the likes of a Rona Matter or a Paddy Matter I think there'll be more deliveries maybe than there had been in recent years. I think that's probably going to be across the board, because at the end of the day, as I said, it takes a lot of work to get it from the full back line to the full forward line, whereas they might just start putting more balls into the danger area. Not hopeless, aimless balls, but I think teams will do that, particularly if they have good guys at the edge of the square. A big pro for Tip as well is that they have a brilliant free taker in these conditions. This is like club hurling. You're going to get Jason Ford could conceivably get 15 or 16 points in a game, 11 or 12 from frees. That's just the way it is. To have a quality free taker like that, most counties have a quality free taker, but Jason Ford would be right up there with probably TJ as one of the most reliable free takers, and I think that's another asset. Plus they have Shamie Callanan or someone like that who could step in if anything happens to him, or at the end of a game if he's gone off.
Do you think that other counties will look at Tipperary and think, if we get stuck into these, they can be got at? Because I've gone through all the big players or whatever, but I'd say the feeling does persist in maybe the likes of Wexford, the likes of Kilkenny, Limerick, Galway, that physically, if you put it up to Tip, they may back down.
I'm not so sure, to be honest with you. I'm not so sure. I don't know. I don't really know if that exists anymore, and particularly with a lot of those experienced lads. Like, just say like Jackie made a run at Callan in the 2009 All Ireland final. Right, that was grand. That was a young Seamus Callan, and he mightn't have been able to bounce back in that game. But I think they're far too experienced for that now. They've too many leaders. Like, I don't think that's the one thing. You maybe looked at maybe some of the other Tip teams down through the years. It might have been harder to identify some of the leaders. You had Owen Kelly and Lara and maybe a couple more. But now, like, Rona Matter's a leader. Colin Barrett's a leader at cornerback. Brendan Matter, Paddy Matter, the McGraths are leaders. Shamie Callan's a leader. Bonner's a leader. Even Dan McCormick is a leader as well. So I don't really think they can be got like that.
Yeah, I know we know Limerick haven't played Clare yet, but assuming that Limerick comes through as everyone expects, do you think Tipperary would put Brendan Maher back full back again on Aaron Gillan if it pans out that way and both players stay fit? Because he did as good as anyone could do against him in the Munster final last year, considering how badly Tipperary were getting beaten all over the field and the amount of ball coming in. Because he's done well there. Like, it's not as if you couldn't put Ronan Maher out into the half back line where he's played for many years. Do you think that Tip will go with that matchup? Because I think they're far more horses for courses than they used to be in the past, when basically we put out our 15 and the opposition could look for mismatches because Tip wouldn't change.
Yeah, totally. We did different defensive positions: best cornerback, best fullback, wingback, centre back, and there was a lot of Tip guys that came into different categories, because like Ronan Matter can probably on a given day play anywhere from 2 to 7. Paddy can play probably 6 or 7. Brendan can play 5, 6, 7, and probably 3. Barrett usually is cornerback. Seamus Kennedy generally plays wing back, could slip in centre back. Barry Heffernan can play any of those positions really as well. So I think they're pretty flexible. So I think if he has form that he's been able to stop one of the best hurlers in the country, or neutralise his threat somewhat, I see no reason why they wouldn't do that. Plus, that maybe would release Ronan to the half back line. And I've said it to you before, like genuinely think he's one of the best playmakers in the game, despite the fact that he's a wing back. His striking in is unbelievably good. He always gives good ball into the forward, and it's this little flick of a wrist that goes about 80 yards. Plus, he's an attacking threat from wing back then. He's an attacking threat that can get 2 or 3 points. As well as that as well, like, I'd be interested to see with his line balls, all that becomes a bit more, even more relevant now. Ronan Matter striking the line ball over the bar in a game where they scored 27 points is not as relevant as Ronan Matter scoring a point from a line ball in a game where there's only 16 or 17 scores got. Like, line balls, and say for Joe Canning as well, they become even more important because scores will be harder got in conditions.
Absolutely. So that's it for the Tipperary preview. If you have any thoughts on the Premier County, let us know. And don't forget, you can go to orgaretro.com if you want to get this top or even that Derry top, and put in the Our Game promo code and you get 15% off.